So in 2023, I read 41 books. These are the books, and I'm going to rank them now. This is the ranking. So we start with Unhinged Masterpiece as the top tier. I would have just put Masterpiece, but most of the books that I thought were masterpieces were kind of unhinged. Then I have binged books that I want more of. These two top tiers are very, very close together. Like they're very... My laptop is breathing hard. He's getting excited. These two are both like basically a top tier, but a little bit different. Then we have, yes, book, which means it's a book. I don't really hate it. I don't think it's a masterpiece. It's just a book. It's not bad, okay? This is not a bad part here. Then we have divided, which are books that I'm divided on. So books I'm divided on, there are books where I liked parts, but then there are also parts I didn't like. I don't hate them, but there's something that I struggle with. Then we have Not My Thing, which are books that I think are good objectively as far as it goes, but just not my thing, okay? And finally we have Bad Books Go Bye Bye, which are books that I very likely will unhaul. They're just... I don't want to have them on my shelves, okay? I made some bad choices this year and I just want to erase them from memory. Okay, I ordered them chronologically. So from January to December, there were a couple of months where I didn't really read. And also, for the first part of the year, like the first 3 months, I was at a mental health hospital. So don't judge my reading choices, okay? I was in a vulnerable place, also had limited access to books. So without further ado, let's jump in. And the first book that we have is The Last Day of the Dinosaurs, which is non-fiction, and I'm gonna place it... hard. I didn't really binge it, but it was quite interesting. So we put it in Yes Book. It's about, yeah, the last days of the dinosaurs. So you have timestamps like second after the meteorite dropped on Earth, and then a year, or like a week, a year, a month, 100 years. And it has these little scenes where you get to see the day-to-day life of a dinosaur after this impact of the meteorite. So it's quite interesting, I liked it. Then I have Don't Worry, and this is kind of a self-helpy book. Didn't really help me because it was very much focused on office and workspace areas, and I'm at uni. I was working in an office, so I can understand how this might have helped, but it's also Japanese and the work culture there seems to be very different. So it didn't really help me, and it's not really my thing. Okay, next up we have The Colorless Tsukuro Tazaki and His Years of Pilgrimage. And I binged this book. It's my first Murakami. I didn't want to read him because I heard from so many people that he's sexist. And yes, he is, but he is a very good writer. I read it in like a day or so. And then I was like, I need more Murakami. And the good thing is that most of his books are very similar. So it's usually like some kind of artistic loner dude who likes to swim and listen to jazz, and he falls for some unavailable woman, and it's very atmospheric. It was absolutely my thing, okay? I'm not ashamed. He's a good writer. For a good book, I'll probably take some misogyny. Don't quote me on that. That's bad. But I really enjoyed this book, okay? Next up, we have Why Did You Stay? Another memoir, and I binged this. It's from a woman who got cheated on by her famous boyfriend, who's a comedian, and the relationship was also quite toxic and abusive, and she stayed for a long time, and now she reflects on that. Then we have The Wife by Meg Wolitzer. I put it in Yes Book. It sounds so harsh, I shouldn't have named it that. This book is about a woman who marries a writer, and we first meet them at basically the later stage of their life, where they're on a plane to go and accept a prize, which her husband won, but the wife is plotting to leave him, and then a whole lot of stuff unfolds. Very interesting, also great perspective on like feminism and art. Next, we have our first unhinged masterpiece. And when I say unhinged, I mean unhinged, because this is a woman who's a teacher and she's into little boys. And she only became a teacher because she wants to be near to these little boys. It is unhinged, okay? It is basically reverse Lolita. You need a strong stomach for this one, okay? Next we have Breathe. I even forgot who the author was. It's French. I think in French it's called Respire. I just got it out of like a book stack by the side of the road. But it's not my thing. It's about bullying, and she was only 16 when she wrote that book, and it kind of, yeah, you can definitely see that she was only 16. I wouldn't say it's not bad. You can read it, you can binge it even, but it's not gonna be life-changing. Next up we have Wintering by Catherine May, and it's about going through tough times. It's not really a self-help guide, more of personal essays, but they're always about what to do if you go through hard times. And she also interviews other people, mostly women, about their habits and things to do when times get tough. And I really like that because I was in a tough spot. So that's a good book and I might come back to that. Next up we have another Murakami, which I also binged. It was South of the Border, West of the Sun. And the storyline is the same. Some dude falls in love with a woman and he listens to jazz, goes swimming and is unhappily in love. It's the same recipe over and over again, but I don't care. I like it. Next up, oh, this is gonna be difficult. We have Rebecca Solnit. I don't want to put it in Yes Book, but it's not an unhinged masterpiece, okay? It's not binge-worthy. It's an essay collection about getting lost in every sense of the word. It takes some time to read it. You need to take your time to read it. I just put it in Yes Book. I think it'll live there. It's very interesting. In the beginning, like the first chapter, like the first essay, I read a quote that really resonated with me, and that was that scientists basically go into the ocean of the unknown and pull the facts out, whereas writers or artists in general take their readers and pull them into the ocean. And as I am a writer, so I have a degree in creative writing, but also I have a degree in biology, and I was like, yes, exactly that. I really like that. Then we have Milk Tea, which is about a young woman who follows her boyfriend to Spain, and she has some issues with eating and her body, and she tries to resolve them and enjoy life again. And it's not easy, but it's doable. Lots of great and delicious food descriptions, tackle some tough topics, but there's also like lots of light and fun. Then we have a collection of 3 short stories called 3 Streets by a Japanese author who lived in Berlin, and these stories are kind of based on what happened to her in Berlin, but they're also ghost stories. They're very abstract, so you need your time to get through them. It's a very thin book, but it took quite some time. Then we have Memorial, 29th June, which is a book that I binged. It's written in verse and it is kind of dark academia, but more literary fiction. So there's a woman who goes to uni. She is now grown up and remembers all this, and she's basically in love with the same guy that her best friend at the time, and who's still her best friend now, is. And then we have, it's not really unhinged, but kind of. I mean, it's called A Crying Book, and it's just a book about crying, essays and little like snippets and pictures and everything, and I really loved it. I think I read it every year, so that must be my 3rd or 4th reread. It's very short, very readable, super interesting, and if you're into crying, that's your book. Then we have My Mind to Me a Kingdom Is, which I am a little bit divided on. It is very hard to read, both with the prose that is written in, both with the language, which is quite complex, and then the author mixes in fictional accounts with actual accounts. And then the topic is also about the suicide of his brother, so they're like fictional essays, and it's very interesting, and I really like what the author tried, but it took me some time to get through it. And what I liked was this feeling of, oh wow, that's a cool story, is that real? No, it can't be. And then you Google and it's real, and then on the other hand you're like, oh, that must be a real story, and then it's not. So that's really interesting, but it's just so tedious to get through the prose and the language, so that's why I'm very divided on this one. Then we have another Murakami, and okay, so I binged this, but I think I'm actually kind of divided on that one for personal reasons. I still put it in binge books because I binged it. The love interest, I mean, same story as before, but the love interest goes to a kind of a clinic, and it very much reminded me of the place where I was at, kind of at least. But okay, now spoiler it, if you don't want to hear it, skip forward for about 30 seconds. So the girl, she kills herself. She's also depressed, and I very much saw myself in her. And then she just ends up hanging herself, and I was just, it was really shocking. So also trigger warning. I didn't feel good after I finished that book. I really felt bad. I still enjoyed reading it, but I felt bad in a not enjoyable way after I read that. Yeah, I just put it into binge because it's very much personal. That is my opinion on that book. Then we have Yellow Face, and I think I definitely binged it. It's very binge-worthy. It's about a woman who steals her American Asian colleague's book after she dies and publishes it as her own, and then gets called out for it, and all hell breaks loose. It is also quite unhinged. Then I have Arrangements in Blue. I think it cut off the top, so I was just like, why is it called just In Blue? That is an essay collection, and I picked this up because it's about being single and being in love with yourself. I am divided on it because I can see where the author Amy Key is coming from. She wants love, she doesn't get it, so she makes her life in a way that's still nice and realizes you don't really need love, like romantic love. We're talking not about friends, but like having a partner. And I was a bit disappointed because I never wanted this romantic love and having a partner so badly. You know, I tried it a couple of times. I'm not completely opposed to it. I feel sometimes very isolated because it's not the center of my life. It's just like something that's about as interesting as, you know, which color your car is or something, you know? It's not very important to me. I don't even have a car, by the way. But yeah, and I was hoping to connect, and then there was this longing for romantic love, and I was a bit disappointed because I still feel isolated and that something wrong with me, which it is not. It's just like relationships aren't very high on my list of priorities. So I'm divided on this, but that's absolutely on me. I would still recommend it. Very interesting and very, very well written. Then we have Penance. Let's be honest, I binged this book and it is about true crime. It's a fictional crime that happened and a fictional reporter who wants to write about this crime, but it's also very much about how true crime is handled and the whole hype that surrounds it. It's quite thick like this, but you get through it so fast. Then we have Either Or, which for me is an unhinged masterpiece. It's the second installment of Elif Batuman's The Idiot. There are people who didn't like it. I, for the first part of The Idiot, didn't like it because the protagonist is, well, she's marching to her own drum and you need to get used to that. But then it's a lot of fun. It's very clever, but not in a way that makes you feel stupid. Next up we have Robinson Crusoe, and it's not my thing. I just don't like Robinson. He makes bad decisions and ends up in bad situations. So basically this whole book is fuck around and find out and then complain about it. I'm not gonna unhaul it because it's a classic and, you know, I want to have it on the bookshelf. But other than that, no. Okay, I Who Have Never Known Men. Unhinged masterpiece about a girl who's locked up with 40 women. They don't know where they are, might not even be on Earth. They don't know why they're locked up. Nobody knows anything. And then at some point the doors open and the guards just go away. It's just a very weird, but very touching and very interesting book. Okay, then we have still Alice. And I think I saw the movie before I read the book. Great movie. And it's about a woman who gets early onset Alzheimer's. She's only 50 and she's a professor for linguistics, so it hits her very hard. And the whole book is very hard to read on an emotional level, but just so interesting, and I think also quite important because it, you know Alzheimer's, you might have even heard of early onset Alzheimer's, but what it really means to have a person who's forgetting their whole life, even the names of their children and like all the people you love. Very touching, very interesting, and I absolutely binged it. Then we have Oh William by Elizabeth Strout, which is, I think, part of not a trilogy, but like several books, but you can read them each on their own. They're not really connected. It's about a woman who goes on a road trip with her divorced husband to find his sister, or half-sister, who he apparently has and just found out about, and they're already in their 60s, I think. Very touching, also very readable, and just like great fun overall. Then we have The Cat Who Saved Books. Also a book that I binged. It's a very cute book. It reminds me a lot of a Studio Ghibli movie. A boy whose grandpa dies and then the cat picks him up and he has to go save books. So if you want a feel-good read, that's definitely it. Also quite a short book. And now we're gonna get to the bed. So I read It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I did it for a video and then I decided no, I don't want to put on more attention on that. It's just, yeah, if you're interested in it, go Google it. What I want to say about Colleen Hoover's books is that they're like pseudo deep. So they have these like very heavy topics and then I don't know, feels like watching a really badly produced soap opera. I also read Ugly Love. That was even worse. And then I read a thriller, and I think I might even keep this, because it was still very bad, but I actually was entertained. Yeah, I'm gonna keep that. Okay, now what do we have next? Oh, The Red Notebook. A cute story about a woman who loses her notebook, falls into a coma. A bookshop keeper finds it and falls in love with her, but it just was not my thing. Then Stephen King, Misery. I'm divided on that one. Okay, let's start at the beginning. The plot is a famous writer breaks both of his legs, gets found by a woman who declares she's his #1 fan. She finds out that he wants to kill the protagonist of his favorite book and forces him to write a new book, basically, that resurrects her favorite protagonist. And it was interesting because like the whole fangirl movement, especially now with like lots of people are into K-pop and like this whole fangirl thing, you know, is exploding again. When I was young in the 90s, there were like lots of boy bands and people going crazy about them, and before that it was the Beatles, you know. And women can be really passionate and I really like that. And in this book it gets vilified and on a level that I don't really like, but still it was interesting, and also it's Stephen King, so yeah, it's gruesome and scares the shit out of you. Then we have Bad Books Go Bye Bye, Murder at the Bookstore. I just wanted to check out cozy crime. It's absolutely not for me. I guessed the killer on the first 30 pages. It was just so tedious. The murder was not even at the bookstore. It was somewhere else. It was just like the person who was running the bookstore died. I don't know, I don't want to talk about it anymore, it was bad. Then we have The Woman in the Purple Skirt, which is about basically kind of stalker situation. So one woman is next up we have Silver Nitrate, and that is Ye's book. It's about horror movie. My camera just died. I'm not sure if I talked about The Woman in the Purple Skirt, stalker stuff, and yeah, it's a good book, go read it. Silver Nitrate, horror movie stuff happening to horror movie buffs. Amusing, but has its length, and yeah, it's a good book, just not my favorite. Then, we need to go up to the top. Bear by Marian Engel, unhinged masterpiece. It's really good. It's about reconnecting with nature, but it's also about banging a bear. It's a bit unhinged, but it's really good. So just go read it. Very short book, very nice. The Canadians, am I right? Then we have Study for Obedience, which I am divided on. I liked the idea. It's a woman who her whole life was made to obey her family and everyone, and wants everybody to like her. And then she comes to another country where her brother lives, into a small village, and wants them to like her, but there's just a big disconnect between them, and she's also a bit unhinged. What happens is that I think kind of that she's a witch, or at least wishing them very ill. The writing style is quite overboarding and very like flowery and quite hard to read, so I really like the idea, but it was very hard to read. kind of divided on that one. Then we have The Places Left Unfilled, which I'd say is... I did binge it, but it's yes book. It's a memoir about being groomed, and I have read quite a few memoirs about being groomed, and I think there are better ones out there. It is very interesting, but just not the best. Then we have The Red Parts, which I binged. Also in the area of true crime. So the author Maggie Nelson has an aunt she's never met because this aunt has been murdered in I think the 70s and left the whole family reeling because they never found the murderer. But now, and now it's like the early 2000s, she's written a book about her aunt and gets approached by a police officer who says, well, we have reopened the case because we have now genetic material and I think we found the killer of your aunt, which is crazy. And then she goes through that whole process and they have to go to court and everything. It's very heart-wrenching, very interesting, and I binged it. It's also a short book. Loved it. Then we have Woman Eating. Very fun concept. A woman who's also a vampire goes into the real world and there's nothing more she wants than eat human food, but she can't. She needs to eat blood. And also she's an artist and trying to find herself and who she wants to be. She's never met her human father. Her mother's a vampire as well. The concept was really interesting, but in between I was a little bit bored. Then we have Fever Dream, and it is an absolute unhinged masterpiece. I loved it so much. It's a very short book. I read it in one sitting. It's ecological horror, and I don't want to really talk too much about it because it's so short. It's so easy to, you know, spoil it for everybody. But such a recommendation. Really amazing. Then we have Magma, and that is also an unhinged masterpiece, and this one is about toxic relationships, or like one toxic relationship, and it gets pretty extreme, and I have to put a trigger warning in front of this. I think for the unhinged masterpieces, most of them have a trigger warning. Not all of them, no, not all of them, but you know, they're a bit heavier. Still read them, they're good. You can't coddle yourself. The world is a cruel place, but our one solace is that we have great books about these horrors that happen. Anyways, very bleak relationship by an Icelandic author from a poetry collective. And the Icelandic have like lots of literature and they really love it. They love reading and everything. And this book is also very easy to read because it is written in verse, and like the chapters you only have one sentence, and you know, there's more paper than there's words, but still that is really good because everything that happens in such a dense space, and it really like feels like an explosion. I loved it. And finally, Excavation, which I'm gonna put here. This one is about grooming as well, and it has been quite a controversy because the author of this book, Ortiz, accused the author of My Dark Vanessa to have stolen her story. And then it turned out that the author of My Dark Vanessa was groomed as well. And that's kind of part of why I got into reading books about grooming, because they seem to all follow the same narrative, and that is quite interesting. Like, we have social narratives that are very, very similar. Anyways, it was a book that I binged and it was actually quite good. Very heavy as well. And I think that's it. Yep. That's it. Okay, cool. These are my books that I read. 41, not my most intense reading year, but as I said before, health-wise, also not my best year, and I'm actually quite happy. I read quite a lot of books that I really liked, very few books that I didn't like, a couple of books that I was divided on, but overwhelmingly enjoyable books. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you've read any of these books and have the same or a different opinion than me, post me a comment. If you like this video, you can go and like it and subscribe to my channel. I'm a very small YouTuber still. I am happy about everybody who subscribes. I'm very excited. Every morning I update my like little YouTube page and look at all the people who start following me, and I think it's just so cool that I can put stuff out into the internet, and then people who I don't know and some people who I know, hi by the way, they just look at it and enjoy it. and get some sort of joy out of it. So that's it. Thank you for being here and making it so far, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!